Welcome to this episode. I am Mohammed Younas, CEO of vFairs, and today I'm delighted to have Vanessa Lovatt as my guest. Vanessa is a true leader and innovator in the events and B2B media space with nearly 2 decades of experience spanning strategy, community, building, and event technology. She's currently the founder of Event Tech World, and we'll discuss a lot about that in the coming postcard. Event Tech World, a thriving community for event tech buyers and users, and serve as a strategy consultant for the Financial Times, supporting growth initiatives across FT Live and other programs. Vanessa has a proven track record of delivering transformative results from pioneering customer engagement strategies to launching impactful communities and advisory boards. Her passion for driving meaningful change in the event sector makes her an inspiring voice to learn from. In this episode, we'll explore the evolving landscape of events, including strategies for creating value-driven experiences, insights into audience engagement, and how Event Tech World will change the future. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get started.
Thank you very much for having me. I feel this is a hell of an intro. I'm going to have to live up to it now.
Absolutely. And before we get started, I want to make sure that I just give this point. Again, guys, if you want to keep on hearing from experts like Vanessa and everyone else, please subscribe to this podcast so that next time, whenever a podcast is released, you guys get this notification. So, Vanessa, tell me what led you into the events tech world. What drives you into this events industry that you operate in now?
Oh, wow. Well, you said nearly 20 years, and it will be March the 2nd. I will officially be able to say it has been 20 years in this glorious industry. And like most people, I fell into it somewhat unexpectedly. I had a friend who worked at Informa, and she suggested I went for an interview, and that was how I learned about this world of events, which no one really, certainly back in my day, no one really told you a lot about when you were trying to work out your next steps after university. So I went into the world of conferencing. It's a bit like a drug. You get hooked really fast and it's really hard to find anything else, I think, that gives you that buzz that you get from an event. And I was really fortunate in the roles that I had very early on, that I was able to have a thumb in most pies, in that I worked a bit with sales, I worked a bit with marketing, I worked with content and production. And I was ultimately in charge of a P&L of an event from my very, very, very first day of my very first job. So it really quickly gave me that extra insight into the different facets of the event world, as opposed to instantly going down one channel in the world of events. And the company that I worked for, which I stayed working for them for a really long time, actually, but they invested in it was an online community platform. This was years and years and years and years ago. I think it was about 2008. But what that gave me was a little bit more insight into tech, quite honestly. And I didn't really know it at the time, or I certainly never sat down and thought, oh, great, I'm getting exposed to tech as well here. But I was. And I also got hooked to that, I think. It's the honest truth. And I was always the slightly weird one that wanted to experiment with audience engagement tools and wanted to trial new things like that. And I was definitely a little bit of an oddbod back then. Not many folks were as keen on it, perhaps, as I was. But I just found it interesting, and that it opened doors and presented new opportunities, which were hard to replicate in other ways, I think. So, but it was always about using tech to improve the audience experience for me. That was definitely a big motivator and a big driver behind the things that struck an interest for me.
And just back then, how advanced was the technology? And again, I have been doing virtual events since 2007 and 8, and then in-person events, for the last 5-7 years. But just walk me through that journey. What was the starting point of you using an event tech, and how was it, and what led you to the next one?
It's such a great question. I'll be very honest and say some of it was very rudimentary, and that's not meant to be unkind. I think that's just the reality of where we were then. But also, audiences were pretty forgiving because they didn't have, there weren't better experiences to compare and contrast to. And they were also, if they were interested in experimenting with the online event world, they were probably quite open-minded sort of by self-selection to a certain extent. So my very first virtual event was 2012. And if I think of the virtual delivery, like the technical delivery, it was pretty horrifying. And it was really just a series linked group of webinars. So from an audience experience, it really was pretty clunky. It wasn't slick, but the audiences actually really did turn up because it was information they otherwise wouldn't have been able to participate in. They couldn't attend the event in person, and it was a digital version. So it actually really, really worked, and we kept doing it and kept doing more of it. And I was absolutely, before I say this, not asked to say this, but very little known fact, many, 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 many years ago, I think about 2012, 13, 14, I'm not even sure. I was even a vFairs user and customer because we started to experiment not just with the delivery of sort of quite traditional style webinars. And back then they really were traditional. They were very, very simple. I mean, we struggled to get speakers to turn cameras on sometimes back then, but we did trial the online, like an online world, if you will, which was one of, and vFairs were one of the very first players in that space a long, long time ago. So it was a long time ago, but I was a customer very briefly as well. And that was definitely very experimental compared to the series linked webinars. But I think a lot of it was around experimenting and having the courage to try things and know that they might not work, but to try them with 100% conviction. And, we would go all in on anything we trialed so that we knew if it didn't work, it was nothing to do with how hard we tried. We always knew that we had been experimenting and pushing the boundaries.
Like I've come across very few people who like back then were owning a P&L. So tell me a bit more about that, because owning a P&L for events can be pretty tricky, and again, trying to make how to market it, how to sell it, where to spend that money. So just tell me like some of the challenges of just owning that P&L, and where did you see value, and where do you see like just tons of expense that was just hard to just hold on.
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge because events are one of those things there's no limit to how much you can spend on an event, in my opinion. There really isn't. And that's why I feel very fortunate that was part of my role from the very get-go, because it was drilled into me to be margins conscious and cost conscious always. And I was actually paid on profit share from the very beginning too. So it really, really was, I had a basic salary, but my earnings on top of that were all down to profit share. So it really was in my interest to be laser focused. Biggest cost was always the venue, full stop, the end, that fact. And I don't think that's changed an awful lot at all for the vast majority of events. And marketing was the other really quite chunky cost behind that too, which back then we used to post out brochures and letters, whereas now so you could measure the response to marketing more easily, but now it is really hard to measure full marketing attribution. And I actually don't encourage folks to try to measure it super, super, super strictly. Definitely measure what you can as well as you can to the best of your abilities, but do look beyond the directly attributable marketing returns, because there will be so much that you just can't mark up against a specific activity. So those were always quite tricky. And then travel was a big cost as well, getting teams to events. And I don't think that's changed too much either. But this is why when we did run that virtual event, the first one in 2012, when we went from running events on gross margins of around 50, 60, maybe 70% if you were lucky, and suddenly we're running an event at 92, 3, 95% gross profit margin, it was very hard to not pay attention to that, which is why we did pay attention to it and got even more into the world of digital events. And so yes, when the pandemic arrived, I think I'd already been involved in, I'm going to say 70 digital events.
Wow, 70.
Sometimes. Yeah, I think so. Because I had a whole portfolio of digital events at that time. So with a team helping. And I think there were, in that portfolio alone, there were about 45. And then before that, there'd been a series of digital events too, maybe 60. But I mean, yeah, I would say at least 60.
Yeah. Vanessa, you're one of the very few people who has worked both as a customer and in the event tech companies as well. So just tell me what some of the observation that you just noticed just being on the other side, because being a customer of event tech is one thing, and then actually being a supplier of event tech is totally another thing. And both of them has its just pros and cons. What did you learn being event supplier as well?
Great experience. That is the first thing I would say. So I never, ever in a million years saw myself going tech supplier side. I really, really, truly didn't. But I think, like many people, the pandemic changed so much about our work. And I was working independently when the pandemic hit, and I had 5 different clients. And all of them were already pre-pandemic, they were already trying to improve their digital footprint with their event portfolio. So I went from being full book of work to, can we get more time? Can we get more time? How do we do more of this? How do we do more of that? Online. So it was, for me professionally, it was a really good time because I was comfortable. I knew, broadly speaking, what to do. I had a few relationships with a few suppliers, and personally, it was awful, like it was for everybody, but professionally, it was a good experience. But that became quite overwhelming quite quickly. So I knew I had to make a change. I couldn't keep doing more for 5 different clients. And I came across a virtual event platform. I really resonated with the message. So I contacted the founder, and 7 conversations later, I joined them. And I'm really honest, it was one of my favorite roles ever. I did not expect it to be. And I remember when I went in saying, I'm not a tech person. I know how to use it, but I don't know anything about building it or developing it or anything like that. And the things I learned were so valuable. I can't emphasize enough to you how valuable it was to see it from the other side and to learn about what's possible and what's not possible. Because as a user, I just thought it was really easy to do things that it's just not really easy to do in a nutshell. And the things that I couldn't previously understand as a user, why can't I just change the stream to be on the top left-hand corner to be on the top right-hand corner? I didn't understand why that couldn't be super easy. And then I understood. So it was really fascinating to evolve my understanding of the entire event world, actually the entire event industry. And I also, it's not just virtual event platforms in the event tech space, of course. There's so much other tech beyond that as well. And I developed a lot of partnerships with different sorts of event tech providers, which again, I would never have had that level of exposure. And I became more understanding of things like integrations between event tech platforms, which may do similar things or may do completely different things, and the complexity of those. And I think I'll continue to use the word complexity when talking about tech integrations. So it was truly enlightening. And I'll tell you what else was a real surprise, if I'm very honest, was then going back organizer side. So as you said, I'm a strategy consultant at the Financial Times too, and I'm on the books. I'm sort of on a long-term contract with them. So I've really got to understand the team super well. And it's an amazing team, amazing business. I absolutely love working with FTLi. But going back organizer side, it was a real wake-up call to me that actually not all organizers, most organizers find tech still really, really hard, because quickly I was back in a team of organizers, but also networking more with other organizers. And the frustrations were very, very real. And it was a wake-up call as to quite how hard it still is for most organizers to get it right.
And maybe just, is that one of the reasons that you wanted to just build this community of event tech world so that you can help solve some of the challenges?
Indeed, yes, you are absolutely right. I think my first eight or 9 months, I just kept thinking, this is mad. How can it be so unbelievably hard? But also, I'll tell you something else I've really come to realize is that the suppliers and the buyers often speak a slightly different language, not intentionally, and with all the goodwill in the world, but still speak a slightly different language. And that was the bit that really kept coming back to. And I joke, and I'm going to say it to you as well, that if I had £1 for every time any tech platform, so beyond event tech too, but any tech platform said, oh, we have a native integration, it'll take you 5 minutes to switch on, I could retire. But the reality of that is just so far from the truth for probably 99% of event tech users and buyers. And so that's when I say we talk a different language, that's the sort of thing that I mean. So yeah, the first sort of 8 or 9 months, I just kept scratching my head thinking, gosh, how can this be so unaligned or misaligned? Sorry, that's the appropriate word. And then it was the beginning of last year when I just thought, hang on, I've got experience of doing both sides here. I think I can probably help people a bit. Yeah, and exactly that, and try and bridge the gap. And in time, I hope, have the suppliers and the organisers talking a slightly more similar language and understanding each other better as well.
Vanessa, I think given your exposure on both sides, I have to kind of maybe have a bit of a deep dive into the event technology that you have. There's different parts of event technology that different organizers use, and just kind of quickly get your comments on what's good out there, just in terms of feature set, and then what do you think should improve in the coming year, or let's say in 2025. So let's start with, for any event, the first thing that you want to do is you want to build a landing page, you want to have a reg form, you want to have a ticketing. I have asked this question to everyone, and I know it's a pretty generic question to ask. I'm going to ask it anyways. But what's your take on reg forms? Should they be, 3-4 fields? Should they be long to capture, as much as lead information that you can get? Let's start from there. And just some of your best practices on how to go about building a landing page, reg form, ticketing, and your experience with that.
Yeah, I think it's great you asked this question. And actually, maybe one day you could splice out everybody's answers and put it into one, because I would love to just sit and listen to loads of different people's opinions on this all in one fell swoop.
It's going to come very soon. I've asked this question already to almost a dozen of our hosts, all great event tech experts. And, hopefully, my team is listening.
I think it would be good. I'd love this.
That. Yeah.
But I think my answer is going to be annoying. Because I am going to say, but with total conviction, that your registration form should be tailored to the audience of your event. And by that, what I mean is, if your event is let's start with a massive expo with 15,000 registrants, and that, I say massive, it could be way beyond that actually. Let's say 50,000 registrants. And people are coming to visit for 6 hours, and they want to meet a couple of vendors. They want to meet their friends who they already know from the sector, and then probably get home early in time to watch a box set on TV. Then you need to ask them as little as you can. So I'd probably keep it to, email, name, company, maybe why they're attending, and job title. It'd be great to have that why they're attending. And this is my personal opinion. I'm sure many people would say just ask for their email, but ask for as little as you can to still enable them to have a good experience. I think that's the crucial bit. That's why I say add in that, what's your reason for attending? And then go back to them afterwards and ask them to tell you more information, and give them reasons to do that as well. You'll have a better experience, and here's how. If, however, on the flip side, you're running a 100-person super senior networking event for CFOs in the energy sector, I'm making this up as I go along, where they are expecting to arrive for 2 days and to have sit-down meetings with 16 other people, and to leave fully connected and networked and educated and enlightened and, quite brain saturated, then I think you can ask them more details, because their expectation of the event is completely different to the first scenario that I gave. So I really think your registration form must be aligned with the sort of event that you're running and the audience's expectations of attending that event. And the higher their expectations, the more likely they are to give you that information, because they understand that by providing that intelligence, they will in turn be able to have a better experience. What we see in reality, though, is very often those two examples sort of becoming woven up. So when I register to go to an exhibition, very often I will do the longest registration form that I will possibly ever be asked to do. And I understand why, because I work in events, right? So I get it. But for somebody who perhaps works in the defence sector or the pharma sector or whatever else, who doesn't understand what we understand, it's a barrier, and you're going to get less registrants. So it comes down to your event goals. Is it quality or quantity? And it comes down to the audience's goals as well. What are they going to get? The more they're going to get, the more they're going to give. Like you say, you get out what you put in, right? It's really down to that. So it's about knowing your audience. I think that's my answer.
I love that. Just a follow-up question. Assuming that it's one of those one of those events where audience expectation is high and hence you want to capture more information from them, do you prefer or do you suggest having it in one long form?
Yeah.
Or more of a wizard base that,
yeah,
personal information, company information,
Sure.
why you're attending, and so forth? So are you more of a long form person or wizard, kind of a Q&A person? Yeah.
I personally like to go through it in stages, because it's still it should still be a fairly quick and fairly painless, let's say, experience. And I quite like a section that will say to me basic details, or contact details. And then the next section is about you, because it helps my brain to filter in. And I do think also, let's be honest, people do scroll down and see how much is coming up below. And if it's an overwhelming volume, it is very off-putting. The flip side is when you go stage by stage and people really can't see, that can be off-putting. So that's where, for me, the sort of, what do they call it, completion bar is very important, so that I can see that I am progressing, and hopefully progressing in a reasonably speedy manner as well. And I'm not answering 10 questions and I'm only 12% of the way through. But I think if I've got a completion bar, that really, really helps me to keep going.
I think that helps. Let's discuss some of those paid events and just your take on tickets, packages, early bird discounts. Just some of the best practices on that one. Assuming it's a paid event, what's your take on early bird pricing? Do you see that's working in today's world? Because again, I have asked this question to a lot of other guests, and a lot of people are making decisions right in the end. Just think about a lot of events that you might have attended. How many times, maybe at least in 2024, did you purchase that early bird ticket or not? So just a bit on that.
Yeah. So I'm going to be annoying again. There's still an element of know your audience, right? So some audiences are going to be cost conscious for whatever reason, that's who those individuals are, and that's how their departments, businesses, job functions are targeted and incentivized. So if it's a cost conscious audience, this is going to help. If it's not a cost conscious audience, it's going to make absolutely no difference whatsoever. And I've worked across both. And there are some audiences that will be really driven by this still now, definitely. But there are also many that I think we kind of kid ourselves. We do it in the hope that it will bring forward a booking pattern. But in reality, there are some audiences that they're going to go regardless of what it costs them, because A, the event is that valuable to them, and B, the budget isn't going to stop them going if they miss a £200 discount. So I really do think it does come down to the audience. And this is where, and I think also this is where, again, being paid on profit share from the beginning, I had to know my audience, because otherwise I wasn't going to make any money. So for me, customer intelligence, audience intelligence, and tailoring to that audience that's one of the really key roles of the commercial side of the events, the paid events world. So I do think they can work, but for the right audience.
Makes sense. let's move on to the next stage. So again, someone has purchased a ticket, and let's just fast forward. Actually, let's discuss a bit of a communication piece. Your take on just how to connect with this audience after they have purchased all the way to when they're going to come and attend the event. Again, you live in UK. You have worked with customers across the UK, Europe, as well as North America. We work with pretty much APAC, UK, Europe, North America. What the trend I see is that a lot of again the marketing campaigns are in some part of the world is purely email, which is pretty much standard across the world. I'm seeing more and more requests from our customers. Oh, by the way, can you enable the SMS campaigns for us? We have that module. Can you enable the WhatsApp communication module for us?
Yeah.
Just tell me a bit more, like your take on it, because again, as I mentioned, like we deal with the Middle East region, etc., and they're big on WhatsApp, and then like I don't like SMS or WhatsApp. I'm purely an email person altogether. But just have you seen any trends where some of these different methods of communication work? Just to remind people of what to do and how to do.
I haven't seen loads recently, I think is what I would honestly say. They definitely exist, and I have received them. Certainly, I was on the on an SMS marketing group for an exhibition, which was not an exhibition that I would ever need to or want to attend. But I was kind of intrigued to see what they sent, so I didn't stop the messages for quite a while. And I think if it's an exhibition you're going to go to every year, you just need those easy reminders to make sure you do it. Probably not invaluable. Sorry, it probably is quite valuable. But I think if it's a high ticket price, £4,000 attendance to go somewhere, plus you've got all your travel costs on top, I would question how much an SMS or a WhatsApp message would reflect the value of that scale of event and that sort of purchase and acquisition. So I think, again, I'm sorry, I'm going to sound like an absolutely broken record here. But there's a little bit of what's appropriate for the audience and for the nature of the ticket that you are trying to sell or to have taken up if it's not paid for. And I think it also depends on whether there's a community or not there. So if I think I am actually I'm part of quite a few communities, but one that I joined really recently, which is a social media. It's a social media marketing community, I suppose. And it was created by a tech platform. And I used their tool and I saw the community. I thought, this sounds interesting. Yeah, I'll sign up to that. It's a WhatsApp community, but it's one-way directional communication. So it is in no way overwhelming or exhausting or painful. And it's actually great because every new feature, I get a WhatsApp about it. And I love it, because it's super easy. The links are there for me to check it out on my phone. And they're growing quite fast. So they're doing a lot of customer onboarding events. And I have been to 2 of those because I received a WhatsApp message about it. And this is quick, easy access. Oh yeah, that would be really helpful. There's a 30-minute link. I'm going to stick it straight into my diary. So for that sort of thing, I think it's actually really, really interesting. But I had opted into that. And that for me is the second factor here, is how opted in or out you are of something like SMS and WhatsApp, because it's pretty personal. And if I have really consciously opted into it, I'm probably going to receive it with a bit of disdain, if I'm completely honest. Who are you and why have you got my number and why are you messaging me? But because I know I opted into this community, because I want the information, I'm already really quite engaged. So time and a place, I think, would be my response on that.
I'm going to double down on just what you said. I'm also part of this vFairs group, which is young presence organizations. It's a group of 100 CEOs within the area that I live in, and it's a WhatsApp group. Yeah. And again, as I mentioned, I'm more of an email person, but this is the only WhatsApp group that I love the most because, again, it's 100 people I know. It's a very personalized group of people, and a message here and there. I know that I might miss an email when something like this exists, but I think communities in the form of WhatsApp group do make sense, because in that case, you have opted in for that, and I think you care about what's being shared in that group.
I think you're right. And that, I would also say with WhatsApp communities, because I've been looking into this myself for Event Tech World, and I got very excited, thought, perfect, I'll do a WhatsApp community. However, I am not going to do a community, let me call it a community where everyone can contact each other on WhatsApp because of the anonymous nature of it. So if I'm in a WhatsApp community and someone else sends a message, all I can see is a number, as in their telephone number. And in a business sense, I think that's lacking information such as, are they a buyer or a supplier? Have they actually done this before? Have they been doing this for 6 weeks or 16 years? And without being able to even look them up, I don't know the context. So I think WhatsApp for business, well, there's a reason it didn't grow up as a business tool, I suppose. And that I love the one directional nature of the community that I'm in, because I'm getting useful info, but without it being overwhelming. I think 100 people is great though for a WhatsApp group, as you've said there.
Yep.
It would just be, maybe step carefully when you get into the thousands, I think, with WhatsApp communities.
Let's fast forward to the event day. You're attending this event, and the first thing that you go ahead and pick up is your badge. You have the badge, you have the lanyards. What's your take on some of the best practices on badges and lanyards and the badge printing software? Should they be, eco-friendly, or should they be not? And, like some of those things, and, just a bit on how the badges should look like, etc. Just any best practices around that, like what you typically, when you're running your events, what's your take on some of those things?
We just had a tiny glitch there. I'm back. Sorry, I briefly froze. Right. But so my first thing is I like a badge. There's sometimes you hear debate, do you need a badge or not? I'm in camp badge, firstly. Secondly, for me, the number one thing that I would like to see is someone's first name. I really want to be able to say, hi, Jenny, I'm Vanessa, and pick up that conversation quickly. So for me, that is the number one thing. And if I think back to badges from days of old, they really weren't like this at all. And you also had not loads of options either. You weren't able to be flexible with them. The next thing for me would probably be organisation. But to be honest, I'm most likely to lead with a first name, introduce myself, ask who they are, where they work, what they do, and have the conversation. So I'm happy with very little info. I just really want that first name. I'm less fussed on branding of the event and things like that, if I'm completely honest, because it takes up quite a lot of space and I sort of already know where I am. I like to think it. I would love to see a couple of other things on there. Wi-Fi code, so boring, but really, really helpful. And I'd love to see a bit more QR action on there as well now. So if it's not a badge where you can easily exchange details or easily contact each other through whatever other event tech's in place, then QR codes for people's LinkedIn, for example. And I know we're all very good at using our phones for this sort of thing now, but that would be great. I suppose you probably end up with some sort of data privacy things there. People probably have to opt in to putting those sorts of things on badges in case a sly person is walking around the room taking photos of badges. But simple, again, for me is good, because I'm someone who's happy to have a conversation to find out more about who I'm talking to. It should be a facilitator. That's kind of how I see it. It's almost like the person at the party who announces people. In days of old, no one does that anymore, I realise. But if you imagine a period TV show and there'd be someone announcing someone into the room, that's the role of the badge. It's to say who you are and potentially provide any useful information for the person wearing it as well.
And just what's your take on the badge itself, the quality of the badge? Again, we work with over 1,000 customers, and some of them just want, $1 or $2 per badge, and where it's going to be something that you want to put in a sleeve, etc. Other wants all the way to a PVC badge, a plastic badge, something that's super quality, etc.
Yeah.
Just your take on that part,
Yeah.
because these things can go from one range to another.
Yes, I do have an opinion on this. I'm all in for making events as sustainable as possible. And so my answer is definitely eco-friendly as far as can possibly be and works. That would be my last bit. So I did go to an event recently where the lanyards and the card badges were fantastic eco credentials, but the lanyards did pop off quite a lot. So I think we're learning as as an event sector. We are learning and we are experimenting, which is super important. So I was happy with the experiment. I'd never seen badges like them before, and I was very happy that they were trialing something really quite progressive on the eco front. But I think we've got a real duty of care here, and I think there are differences in different geographies as to what is acceptable and what isn't, which needs to be factored in. And there's an education initiative to happen. I think recycling facilities are an essential. So I went to one event where there was information and the lanyards were collected in, sent for washing and reusing. And so it really made you make sure you gave your lanyard back, to be honest, because you were being really coaxed on it. And there was a box to put your the actual card bit in for recycling as well. And they made it do your bit, play a part, contribute, and I enjoyed that. It made me more likely to do it. So that sort of participative engagement approach as well. I will also say I have used only just last year some smart badges, and I really, really liked it. And they are reusable as well and rechargeable, which is very important. I did ask someone how many go missing at each event, and they reckon about 15% per event of the badges don't end up going back because they go home in people's bags or whatever it might be. Yeah. I thought that wasn't too terrible overall, and it was effective. It was a good networking experience. I enjoyed the ease of using those.
Just perfect. The next step, you're in the conference right now, the mobile app. How useful is that mobile app? Do you make use of it? Making use of mobile app, of course, also for lead capture purpose. Sponsors, exhibitors trying to scan the QR code of the attendees, or even attendees networking with each other, creating your own personalized agenda, etc. Just how important you think the mobile apps are for conference or trade show?
First thing I'll say is you're not asking a normal person, because I will want to investigate every page, every single part of it. I'll want to know how it works and what it does or what it doesn't do. And so I probably do more than most people would in the event apps, because I'm curious and nosy like that. With an agenda, for me, is probably the thing that I will use the most, because I want to know where I'm going, what I'm doing. And then at a large event, so you said conference, actually. So if I sit with conference, I'd probably find out a little bit about some of the speakers, and I'd also look at who else is there. In an expo, I do use the floor plan as well, because I want to try and be quite directive about where I'm going and what I'm doing. And time has taught me that roaming around exhibition floors is not a good use of my time. So I will always try to be a little bit planned. I do some roaming, but not too much anymore as well. But the networking question you asked as well, I think it depends on why I've gone to the event, as to how much I will or won't use a networking tool. If I've gone for content, and if it's a sort of a brief trip in and out, which very often it is these days, then I may not use it that much. But if I'm there for an extended period of time to meet people, then I'll be all over the networking part of the app as well. And ideally after an event as well. I am someone who will go back to an app after an event and think, oh, I really wanted to see if there was anyone from company X there. I didn't meet anyone. Maybe they're on the app, and I could either connect with them via the app if that's easy, or potentially via LinkedIn if at that stage it's not that easy to connect with people via the app. And I will probably do that for up to, honestly, it could be a couple of months after the event. Nice. I am definitely someone who'll go back and think, maybe that's a connection that so yeah, I for me, I do like an app. I know there is a really interesting debate around, do you go more down QR codes with instant information rather than an app? And I did speak to someone recently who'd done that with great success. But I think it's how much information you need to get across to your audience and what will suit them. Again,
I agree. I think it's hard to imagine that conference of certain size, you don't have an app because, as you mentioned, it just has so many benefits, whether it's the agenda, whether it's a floor plan, whether it's the networking piece, whether it's sometimes, people do leaderboard and gamification, etc. Not everything can be just linked to a QR code. You mentioned, you're someone who goes to the floor, you meet with a lot of experts, etc. Your take on swags, which swags work, which doesn't? What's your favorite swag that you have collected in any of these events?
I'm not a swag lover. I will be totally transparent and say I can't bear useless swag. I just see it as a tremendous waste, and I would much rather that budget, because swag is not cheap either. I would much rather that budget had gone into something more engaging where you really connect with people. And I've worked through contracts and consulting, not so much in-house, but I've worked with teams who are absolutely hell-bent on swag. And so often it's a box tick. It's we've got to do this because we've always done it, and we've got to get something, we've got to get a cuddly toy, or we've got to get a diary planner or a charger or whatever it might be. And I think my advice is just think really carefully about the connection with your brand, with your audience, with your story. Like what is the story you're trying to tell, and does the swag actually complement and enhance that story? So I remember once I worked with an organization and they gave out endless plastic pens whilst also issuing white papers on sustainability. I'm like, guys, this is so unaligned, misaligned again. Sorry, I used the wrong word today. So yeah, I'm not a massive swag fan. My favorite swag has been power bank, because my phone is always out of battery. That is one of my life's greatest challenges is my phone battery. So power bank, you'll get me. But I can't think of much else beyond that. And I do apologize to anybody who's given me some glorious swag in my time. But yeah, I think that less is more for me on the swag front.
Your take on just how fancy the booth itself is, these 10 by 10, 20 by 20 booth, because those are expensive as well, just setting up that booth and everything else. And you're there already spending a lot of money participating in there, and then there's equal amount of money being spent on how fancy the booth looks like. And again, I don't know whether that's important or not, but you have been both a buyer and a seller. So your take.
Interesting is more important than fancy, I think, is what I would say. One of the most interesting booths I worked on was when I was an event tech supplier side, and we did a hybrid event at the booth. That was cool, and it had a lot of people saying, "What's going on here? Is this in the agenda? What's going on?" And it was a great conversation starter, and we got great value from the event as a result, because not only did we sponsor the event and have a great booth, but we had so much content after the event as well. What I was saying was that one of the best things that we did was run this hybrid event from our booth, because then we not only had really great engagement at the event with people asking about it and it being interesting and a conversation starter and topical, but we had loads of content after the event as well. So it was a real double whammy of success, if you will. And so I think, interesting is more important than anything else. What a customer that I work with is a consultancy in the event tech space. And they exhibited at Event Tech Live. And I said, next year, you almost need a massive sign that says, "We don't sell event tech," because it would be interesting. And because most people there are suppliers, people instantly assume that he's a tech supplier. And actually, that's not what his business does. So that would be interesting. It would be a conversation starter. It's like, well, why are you here then? And the rest is then down to that. It's just getting things moving. So yeah, I don't think fancy's everything. It can help though. Let's be honest. A bit of fancy.
Yeah. It attracts attention. Yeah, it attracts attention of
it
people
does.
walking around.
It does.
Vanessa, I know that I'm 15 minutes. I've taken more than 15 minutes of your time already, but just few last set of questions. Again, all of this is extremely valuable for both me as well as our listeners. You are in the event tech space. Your 3 most favorite events that in the event tech space that you like to attend as an attendee, not on the seller side, but as a buyer side, which are the top 3 events that you always look up for to learn more about the event tech space?
Great.
I know most are your friends, but still.
So, okay, so well, definitely Event Tech Live. I mean, I love Event Tech Live. It's an absolute
it's in your home ground, so you have to be there.
Absolutely. So I'm definitely going to put that one on the list. I've been to some quite interesting marketing technology events, which I found very valuable for sort of cross-pollination of information as well. I can't think of the specific names of them, but I would encourage folks to look outside just event tech specifically. I have been to see Event Connect event in the past and found it very valuable as well. I couldn't go last year because I went on holiday at the same time, so I couldn't make that work. But I did find that a useful experience too. I'd love to get some more events in the States next year, and next year being 2026. So we'll see what happens there. But can I be really cheeky and actually say some of my favourite events last year were my own? Because it's true. And I no one's asked me this question. So this is not a prepared answer, I can guarantee you. But sitting down with a group of other users and buyers, Chatham House rules. So nobody's sharing anything directly with, Jenny said this and whoever said that. It's just been unbelievably valuable. And there was a woman who joined, she's head of events for a corporate, so she's in-house event leader. And she came, the second one she came to, and she sort of splurged all of her challenges out, and then she laughed and said, "Oh, I seem to be turning this into a therapy session." But then we all sort of coached and gave ideas and shared experiences. And I'm sorry, I'm slightly hijacking here, but and obviously I'm biased, but it was just so valuable. So I hope that there'll be more of that this year, and I shall be at them, which is even better because I get all the value from them as well.
Again, I have to say, I attend both big events like Event Tech Live, IMEX, and so forth, and I also attend just slightly smaller events, 5, 20 people, and the kind of connections you make in those smaller events, nothing beats that, nothing. So I'm all in for that. So I know that we're right on the time. How can people reach out to you? How can people connect you if they want to learn a bit more about what you do, get help from you, etc., be part of event tech world? How can they connect with you?
Well, I'm all on LinkedIn is a really easy place to find me personally. And then Event Tech World, if you want to find out more, it is eventtechworld.com. And there's a sign up page there. It's free to sign up. And it's anything that we can do to help with you making better decisions around event tech, then we're open to ideas, and hopefully there's some knowledge in there already that might help you out.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Thank you everyone for joining us. Again, if you want to listen to podcasts like these, please sign up for Epic Events Podcast by vFairs. You can reach out to vFairs on LinkedIn, on vFairs.com website. You can learn a bit more about this podcast and many others, by following us. Thank you once again, Vanessa, and again, wishing you all the best in 2025.
Thank you very much.